playing hide and seek in the background, so you may hear screaming. Pay no mind. So my name is Michelle Brownstein. I'm one of the organizers of this wonderful UX Design Meetup group. Thank you all for attending today. This is a session that was rescheduled from December, I believe, right? Yeah, because of the AWS outage that we had at the time, made it impossible to get to the meetup page. So thank you all for coming out today for our rescheduled event. Very excited to have Pavi here to talk with us again, and all the way from Canada. So I'm going to hand it over in just a second. For those of you that are located here in the Gainesville area, Gainesville, Florida, we do have a UX certification program that's going to be held by Start GNV as a citywide initiative. We're going to be working with Nielsen Norman Group for their 5-day UX certification, bringing that cost down to about $1,300 per person for their basic certification program. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me either through the Slack here or through Zoom here. You can reach me on the GNV Connect Slack or LinkedIn. Unfortunately, it is limited to people who live or work within 50 miles of Gainesville. And that's to all of you guys, but unfortunately, so with that said, as I said, I'm super excited to have Pavi here. She is going to be talking to us for a while. We'll have some Q&A. I do encourage you guys to put yourselves on mute during the conversation or while she's speaking, but if you have questions, please feel free to put those into the chat, and we can always come off mute and have that conversation. So I think there'll be some Q&A at the end, and so we'll have time for that. So Pavi, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. All right. So hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. I'm Pavi. I'm excited to be here, and I first wanted to thank Michelle for organizing and coordinating this. And we haven't quite met yet, so I'll start off with a little bit about me before getting into the topic. So I was originally born in Sri Lanka, Colombo, to be specific. And my parents brought me to Canada when I was 8 months. And I've pretty much lived in Ontario, Canada ever since. I live with my family and I have an adorable little dog named Benji. And interesting fact, I used to be a biochemist and I pivoted into UX design after hitting a major point of frustration in my career, and I haven't really looked back since. Currently, I'm a product designer at Shopify, and when I'm away from work, I like to channel my passion into different things such as YouTube, meetups, talks, and blogs to help motivate new creatives to achieve success in their own terms. All right, so let's get right into it. I want to start off with a bit of a flashback. It's November 2020. I'm assigned to a brand new project, and I volunteer to lead the project from start to end as a challenge. Why not? And when I joined, we didn't have a product manager, and the developers had already started to build something based off of designs from a different project. Seems like an ideal situation to walk into, right? And jumping into this part way, I had no idea where to start and what to do. I haven't met the team and they haven't met me. And I realized I was trying to catch a running train. And there were two things I could have done: continue the ride and take a back seat as a passenger, or halt the train to help redirect it. And I was at a fix because I barely knew the team. And as I mentioned, they didn't know me. How might I get them to trust me and influence the change in the way we work? Before that, let me share an analogy. A car is made up of many different components that work together so that the driver reaches a particular destination. A project consists of many teams working together to deliver on the project's outcome. You'd have a project manager or product manager, developers, a content writer, leads, stakeholders, and probably more people. A car has a maintenance schedule for each of its main components after a certain mileage checkpoint is reached. But a project is unlikely to have this maintenance schedule for its teams that are working on the project after a certain milestone is reached. So what are these maintenance schedules that a project needs? Well, it's different from a car's maintenance, that's for sure, since teams are comprised of humans and not machine parts. So the maintenance treatment is definitely going to be different. Back in the days, whenever I say that, I feel like I'm starting to sound like my parents. Back in the days when we were in the office, you'd probably say good morning and greet people as you see them. You may have lunch together with your team or grab a coffee and chat about life and personal things that aren't really related to work. And as we know it, remote work has changed this for us. No one really distracts me at my desk anymore, apart from Benji scratching the door occasionally, and he chooses the best times to do that. I don't have a desk partner to turn to and say good morning to. And these days, we need to make a conscious effort to be intentional and exchange pleasantries to really ask how someone's doing. Prior to working remote, I never really thought about pleasantries and chatting about the weather, for example. But this switch made me realize that these in between conversations are that essential glue that keeps the team together. And part of what makes us humans is that we're more than just the work we do. And small talk helps us discover who people are outside of work. And doing this with a team you barely know can seem awkward at first. It was for me, one of being an introvert, and two, this entire experience being remote. Small talk is something that I struggle with, and I really had to exercise the skill so I can get to know my team and start to grease those wheels to keep things moving along. It initially would start with questions like, how are you doing? How was your weekend? But what made a difference for me was remembering what a team member would have said during a particular conversation. So for instance, when one of the team members said that they were going to do an activity over the weekend, following up with them the next week and specifically asking them how that event went. To influence the team, it's important to know what team members are doing outside of work, life beyond the edges of the screen as we know it. And we build empathy for the humans using our products and the things that we work on from day to day. And similarly, empathizing with our team members is just as important. Other things that I've tried with the team was celebrating smaller milestones and doing it often. I didn't really plan anything extravagant. It might be taking lunch together and chit-chatting, and the rules were that we wouldn't talk about work. But let's pause for a second and think about why we don't do that enough. It's easily seen as superfluous and low priority in comparison to the day-to-day other higher priorities things that we have to do for work. And I actually recall this phrase from Dale Carnegie's book on how to win friends and influence people. It's an old book and parts of the book might be debatable now, but there was this one phrase that I never forgot. Little phrases such as, I'm sorry to trouble you, would you be so kind as to, and won't you please, would you mind, thank you. Little courtesies like these oil the cogs of the monotonous grind of everyday life. Not saying that you have to use these words exactly, but what happens when you stop oiling the cogs? It dries up and ends up hurting itself. Oiling the team bond and having that exchange of courtesies is just as important. And small exchanges like this helped keep the team motivated and comfortable to share their perspectives and feedback. Another part to influencing the team is to give team members more authority and have more say in decision making. The reality is people innately care about the work they do if given the necessary space. But if that space and authority were to be chipped away, that care evaporates quickly and it just becomes purely work. And this idea is not new. Taiichi Ono, industrial engineer and manager at Toyota, introduced the and-on cord, which authorized every employee on the assembly line to halt production when they noticed a certain problem or defect. And even with a rough start, this eventually led to an efficient production of cars with more reliable quality. What if we can put this into practice with our projects too? Empowering the team to raise their hand and say something when it's not working. Here's some of the things that I've personally tried. I frequently, or almost every other day, shared my working progress with the developers as I was exploring ideas. And initially, I found this very uncomfortable because the ideas may be half-baked. I had the fear that the team would get too attached to an idea or blow it off completely before it even started to materialize. But the side effect of doing this was making that space for early feedback and understanding constraints and possibilities sooner. Opening up the space for team members to have a say in the work helped me identify blind spots sooner and even during prototyping. And that regular consultation led to more detailed updates to stakeholders about timelines and knowing we needed to pause because of X reason. And this empowered us to ship a product that was less compromised because we discovered these loose ends at the start and consistently worked on improving it. At the same time, we may not always be singing Kumbaya. You may have disruptors. And in this case, making the space for folks to share their perspectives and thoughts without it being seen as conflict. This really helps build trust through honest and direct communication. And a game changer for me personally was active listening and constantly practicing it and staying neutral. This really helps folks feel that you're playing on the same side as them. And if things get out of hand, acknowledging and reminding the team of the goal and vision that you are headed towards. Several companies have leveraged Toyota's lean practices, such as the Kanban, the 5 Whys, and what I just spoke about with the and-on cord. But why do this? Why empower employees? Because by empowering employees, you let them be humans by caring and taking pride in the work they do. And as a result, you will be respected as a team leader, as a contributor, for giving your team more authority. And this is something that can't be taught. How would you make someone care deeply about something they don't physically own? When I was on the project, I originally got caught up with thinking, as a person who was leading the project, all the heavy lifting and responsibility fell on my shoulders. I thought I had to take on everything. But as you can imagine, this quickly caught up with me and I felt like I was slowly starting to sink. So instead, I started to take a step back and make space for other folks to own a task in a way of self-delegation. So literally pausing to ask if anyone wanted to own it before quickly throwing up my hand and saying that I'll do it. And pausing can be so powerful. You can probably ask some of my colleagues today of the awkward pauses I create to make space for hearing thoughts. It's an 8-second pause that I use every time. And this can feel extremely uncomfortable, but with time and practice, you'll learn to embrace it and you'll also see the value of that. One of the practices I also started was encouraging team members to take turns leading retros and syncs. And that instantly made a difference and also empowered the team to own important aspects of the project. And I truly believe that that contributed to the care and effort that went into it. And of course, that's just a part of it. The other half of that care really needs to come from within, which is why I believe ownership isn't a singular word. It's a teamship. Soon enough, I didn't have to be the only person advocating for the project. The team was able to answer UX questions and explain rationale without me having to be in the room every time. And I'm not saying that this is what you need to do to influence a team and ship something you're proud of. This is what I have personally tried and what's worked for me with my teams. And what do you have to lose other than an opportunity to learn? So here are some of the takeaways that I have for you. Influence by oiling the cogs or that team bond. Use those pleasantries and go beyond the edges of the screen. Give the team more authority and say in decision making. So empowering your team members by making that space for feedback and shared ownership. So to end things off, I'd like to hear about the things that you've tried and your experience with trying any of the things that I spoke about. And beyond our chat today, feel free to connect with me on Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube if you have any questions. And thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Pavi. There is a question in the chat. Samara, I'd welcome you to come off mute and ask it if you like. I will go ahead and preface it with, I'm assuming this is a switch, not a witch, but how was a switch from biochemist to product design?
Yeah, it was quite a pivot. I'm not gonna lie. I think coming from a science background, moving into something more artistic, but I think what helped me was that interest that I already had in the arts. I never actively pursued it, and while I was like pivoting, there was a lot of things that I needed to learn, specifically within like the digital design realm. So there were a lot of challenges that came with that. Even just getting my foot in the door, like getting that first job, was really challenging. Just because everyone looked at my my bachelor's in biochemistry and didn't really focus on the other things that I've done. So that was definitely challenging, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad to be able to have this conversation with you now.
Thank you. It's me, Summer. I was listening to you. So pleasant to watch you. Just like the way you talk is so calming. And I think we really need that, especially me trying to be a mom full time, and also I'm new in UX design. I have like 10 to 12 years of graphic design, but uh, so much going on. But the way you are handling everything, I think it's pretty impressive.
So sweet. Thank you so much for saying that, and good luck with your journey. I think this is amazing that you're even taking this step. That's brave.
Thank you. Do you, just quick question, do you have like a website or something? I'm just interested in people's journeys.
Yeah, for sure. So I have some links that I have up here. If you want to see my portfolio, it's pavi.design. So PAVI.design. That's my portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It is. I did drop it into the chat as well, so hopefully you can access
Thanks,
that.
Michelle.
Absolutely. I'm curious, in terms of getting everybody involved, do you ever run into somebody who's hesitant to take on some kind of mantle, like in your absence, keeping things moving? Kind of like what you're talking about in the last slide, with encouraging everyone to participate in that.
Yeah. So are you specifically talking about at a time when maybe like I'm not around and the team's trying to continue like without having a designer to help them?
Yeah, sometimes I've just seen people, particularly developers, be hesitant to really fill any shoes that are not developer shoes, and take on any responsibilities, even if it's just social responsibilities that are not obviously delegated to them. So I'm just curious your experience with people who maybe are more hesitant to participate in things that they haven't been explicitly assigned to.
Oh, great question. I think that can be a hard thing to answer because I feel like it depends on, I think one of the things I mentioned was like the care being innate as well. I think part of it comes from that. If the team member genuinely cares about the work that goes in. I think the other part of it is sometimes being able to delegate the tasks and volunteering people to own something. I think one of the things I had mentioned was like even something like syncs. Sometimes when I know I'm not going to be there, for example, or like the practice that I started was it was just passing off the baton. So making sure that everyone has an opportunity to own that and lead a sync, for example. And that has worked quite well for me so far in terms of engagement. And I think the other thing is also taking the time to get to know that person. I think one of the things I mentioned was like disruptors. I'm not sure if that would fall in that category, but taking the time to have a conversation with that person, if you feel like they're not really taking on the tasks that you're giving them can also help. So trying to understand things from their perspective and empathizing.
Yeah, that's fair. I think often where I'm coming from is like, if they don't have explicit instructions on how to do something, they don't feel comfortable taking it over. And so,
That's a good
getting
point.
them accustomed to doing that, and maybe just having the repetition of, the syncs or whatnot, and allowing them to take over. That's interesting.
That's a good point. Actually, since you mentioned that, like I had that scenario too, where I was working with a team member who wasn't feeling comfortable taking up like the task of leading a sync. And I think she was a little bit nervous too, because she hasn't done it before. I think being there for that person and supporting them, like I just jumped on a call with her and walked through like the steps that I usually take. And I just created like an outline for her on like the things that she can follow. And I said, don't worry, I'm going to be there to back you up. It's just going to be a team of us, and just reassuring that you got their back too can be helpful.
So when you have team members, hi, this is Elizabeth Boulay. So when you have team members that you have take over a retrospective or something like that, do you also sit in on the retrospective, or do you just sort of not attend?
No, I'm also part of
You're there.
the retros. Yeah, for sure.
And do you give retro feedback as well?
On how it was run?
No,
Or
on whatever it is that you're
oh, what like
retrospecting
the
on.
topic?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually that was one thing that I had to do, because I was also championing the project.
Mhm.
So sometimes you
Oh.
might not always get favorable feedback. But I think I was glad when I saw that things maybe weren't going okay, because that to me showed that the team was comfortable enough to even bring that up and have a discussion about it. So I think it's like making that space and creating that safe space so we can talk about it.
Interesting. Thank you.
I was just going through the chat to see if there was any questions that I missed.
Hi, I'd like to ask you, Pavi, thank you for your presentation. Unfortunately, I missed the first part, so I don't know if what I'm going to ask is something that you addressed in the beginning, but I'm super curious about your transition between like from your background and what you're doing now. And I am in a similar transition, and but just starting. So, and actually looking for my first job opportunities, and also trying to see if actually this is what I want, like UX. I think it is, but would you tell us a bit more about that process and your reflections on, yeah, actually I want to transition and UX is the thing for me, and what were your reasons behind that decision?
Great question, and it's always excites me when I meet folks that are in the middle of that transition, because it's both challenging and exciting at the same time. In terms of me making that decision personally, I was frustrated from day to day. I was in between jobs. I wouldn't stay at a place for, I would say, like more than a year. And at first I thought it was like, maybe it was the job. I wasn't sure if it was me. But I think a couple years ago was when I realized like, no, this is not for me. I found that I was working in like toxic environments, and it just seemed that I was bouncing from toxic environment to toxic environment. And I think in terms of like the growth and development I saw, there was nothing there for me. And I just felt like it wasn't the right fit. So that was like that breaking point for me, and what I call the dip, where I just decided that no, I need to do something about this. fortunately, my partner, he's a software engineer, so he got to hear all of my complaints from day to day, and he finally suggested looking into UX, and that whole term was new to me. So I just started reading some books, and the first book I read was The Design of Everyday Things, which is the best book to read if you're trying to get into user experience. And I was just fascinated, and I started to read more about it, and I took a couple online courses, but I needed something to like sink my feet into more and get my hands dirty. So I took a full-time course in Toronto, a boot camp actually, General Assembly. And at the time they were called Bitmaker. And I took that course. Now there's so many places where you can get certified, but at that time only had, I think, 2 options for schools. So I ended up going there, and it was challenging, as I mentioned. I think building up your portfolio and the rest of that, I can probably get into this quite deeply, but I think that challenge really comes once you've finished the course. The first part of it is taking that step to do something, and then the second step is getting there. So yeah, those are like high level some of the things that I experienced and why I decided to switch.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no worries. I think I saw a question from David here.
Before we jump to that, can you just repeat the name of the book that you mentioned?
The Design of Everyday Things.
Okay.
I think it's by Don Norman.
Yeah, by Don Norman, yeah.
All right. David, did you want to speak to your question?
Sure. So, as both developers and designers, right, we all share a common interest to, solve problems. And, I know that obviously, there's obviously the design of the product that's important, but, at the same point, developers also have their ideas about, about trying to solve their own problems over the course of a life cycle, right? And how, when you talk about trying to, when you talk about team chemistry, part of it is obviously, sticking up for your team and providing them with the resources that they need to do their job. So how, like, did you have instances where the goals of the stakeholders didn't necessarily align with the goals of the development team or the team in general? And if so, how did you kind of how did you rectify that, those types of situations?
Great question, David, and an important one, because this is something that I had experienced like during the course of this project that I was talking about, where the stakeholders didn't have a clear idea of where we wanted to take this product and what we wanted to do. And I think we were just kind of working along and creating our own scope. So in terms of getting alignment, I think we really hit a roadblock when we were in the prototyping stages and we were about to go into our build phase. And because I was working with the engineers, we were working in this incremental build approach, so they were already building things. So when we hit that roadblock, it became really hard because to get into specifics, one of the things that we wanted to do was work on a barcode scanner. And there were a lot of technical challenges that existed within that space, but because it was for a mobile device, we thought this was going to be the best thing for us to work on for this specific feature. And we've later realized like the stakeholders weren't aligned with that, and we had already gone into the depths of it and done the research and everything. So I think the hardest decision was saying that, no, we have to take this out of scope and this might just need to be another project. So I think in terms of that, there was a lot of compromises that we had to do. But I think what helped was keeping us aligned on the thing that we wanted to do. And I think the second part to it was also keeping a wish list. And I found that this is something that really helped us because we were very ambitious with what we wanted to do. So I think having a wish list of the things that we wanted to tackle, even on other projects that we worked on after this, really helped as well. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did a lot. And a couple of years ago, kind of when I was transitioning myself into the designer role, I did a kind of a remote workshop right around when COVID started about what are your hopes and fears as a development team, and as from product management, and it was an awkward situation because nobody really had asked developers, or anybody for that matter, like outside the stakeholders, what were they hoping to do with this project. And very much, obviously when you talk to experienced people, they learn from their own experiences, and they might have things that's kind of a red flag to them. Things to look out for that might not necessarily be obvious to stakeholders. And trying to get alignment was a challenge. So I was just kind of curious what your experiences were with that. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I feel like that can always be a challenge. I'm still trying to find a way to constantly improve that, like getting that alignment with stakeholders. We also have something that we do where there's like one place for a project where like stakeholders can get updates. So that way, hopefully, if something comes up, like we can flag that sooner. And these are like written updates that we post weekly. So anyone and everyone within the company has access to that. So that's something that has also helped.
Thank you. Good idea.
Raheem was asking if he could share, or if they could share a little bit about how they bring their team together. Would you mind?
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Raheem. Just like quite a few people in here, I'm also transitioning to UI UX, but currently I am the deputy director of a adult education program, and I'm the leader of a professional development team. While it's not quite UI UX, we do have to do quite a lot of collaboration because we're working on a lot of curriculum, trying to take a K through 12 curriculum and apply that to adult ed. So one thing I find is when we're working on projects, and I'm hoping Pavi or anyone else can tell me if this is something when I switch to UI UX that might work. Anytime we're working on projects, we tend to do these stop-ins. And what I have my team do is I have them bring in quotes that either reflect something great about the project we're working on or something that kind of reflects a challenge that we're working on. And we kind of just do this like round table discussion of where one person kind of says, no, that quote doesn't apply, but I see this as where it can apply to me. And what I find is, just as you were saying about oiling the cogs, sometimes it tends to lead out from just work into that personal space. And as people start to share, I find that they feel more comfortable with the like a lot of the times on a professional development curriculum we're working on. And I just wanted to say that I think what you said is absolutely works. Like I noticed that they start to want to take more ownership, because when it's that person's week for the quote, they kind of have to back up what they're saying about their portion of the project we're working on. So I don't know if that will work for UI UX. I know it works great for curriculum development and professional development.
I love that. It's almost like a way of doing like a health check or a retro. Like we do health checks, and it's very similar to what Raheem said. And it's like the opportunity to be able to voice those concerns. And sometimes things can get a little personal, but I think it's okay to make the space for that. Because I feel like this is pretty much like the only outlet we have right now to be able to have this kind of conversation with each other on a screen, unfortunately.
Awesome. Jay, did you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Oh, first of all, Pavi, thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed it. As a newbie myself, I'm trying to learn how to really create a new design. I mean, I have a lot of ideas. I don't know where to start, where to stop sometimes, but I was just wondering, when you're assigned to a project, how do you, what is your thought process? How do you have assets? Do you go somewhere? Do you talk to somebody? How do you actually start a new design from end to end? Can you kind of give us your ideas about that?
Sure, that is a juicy question. Just because I feel like the answers can be so broad. I'm specifically going to talk about my experience. Again, I'm no expert. I'm just sharing my experience here. But I think usually how I start off with is understanding where exactly the project is at. I've worked on projects that are in various stages. Like you could be working on a project where the problem hasn't been defined yet. So then you might be starting off from like defining the problem and doing your research and discovery and understanding it. I've also been on the other side of the spectrum where we just know we have to build something and we have to build this feature out, depending on like the company you're working for and what what needs to get done essentially. So during those phases, you might not have time to really define the problem, but what you can do is define that problem within the scope of work that you have. So I think general like frame of reference that I use, or like a high level process, is starting off with understanding the requirements and the scope of work, and making sure I have those documented. Like I'm pretty intense about documenting things because I will forget what decisions I've made, like maybe like even like weeks now. Like I can't, time is a construct. I don't remember things anymore. So I think doing that has really helped. And in terms of like other things, like when it comes to, I can't remember if you mentioned talking about creating components or like a design system. I'm not sure if you mentioned something along those lines.
Yeah.
I feel like
aspect.
that can vary, I think, depending on the kind of work you're doing, for if you're doing it for a client, or if you're doing if you're working at a company. A lot of larger corporate companies already have a team for design systems. Shopify has a team for a design system. But you might also run into situations where you're working for a startup and you have to create that. So that's like a whole other process altogether. And I feel like that has more to do with understanding the principles of what you're trying to address with that design system, the tone. There's a lot of things that can go into that. So I really think it depends on like the part of the process. I don't have like an official like handoff process. I know that's something that sometimes happens in projects. I usually just work with the engineering team from like start to end. If you have engineers, like a product manager, working with them from the beginning and throughout the process is very beneficial and can lead to strong alignment and foundation, especially towards the end.
Thank you.
Great. Smarta, do you still want to ask your question about the gap?
Oh, yes. So I forgot my question. So yeah, I mean, we keep hearing about this gap between design and development, and I haven't entered into a UX role yet, but it has already started making me so scared. That is there really such a gap, and how to overcome that? And especially like if we are working as a team, you know, shouldn't we be uh, working so that we are all on the same page? So how do you deal with that, and have you ever come across that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Summer. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I feel like I heard the same thing when like at the start of like my career too in design, that there's like this gap. I think I've been fortunate where I haven't experienced the sort of gap when I've been working with engineers. And I'm not sure if it's maybe to do with the fact that I collaborate extremely closely with them. Like I literally sit with them. I've previously worked at Capital One too, and we had a very small design team. It wasn't as big as Shopify. So I literally was every day sitting with the engineering team. So I think that really helps too, spending time with that team if you're seeing that there is this gap, because that's the best way that you can cross-pollinate and learn from each other essentially. And that has worked wonders for me. I've even brought the engineers into like the research process. So they've been part of usability testing and observations. That brings so much value because they never are able to see that. They never get to come to what we call the front line. So that has always been helpful. So I say, don't think of it as a gap. Like if you put into perspective of like bringing that closer, essentially is like removing that hurdle.
Awesome. Because the only reason I moved from graphic design to UX design is because I was feeling in my 10 to 12 years of experience in graphic design that I was not being involved in like any decision making. I was being, brought in when all the decisions were made in the end. And I just felt like that they probably don't think graphic design as such an important part, and now I am hearing the same things about UX design. Like just last night I was reading this whole thread on Twitter, what is bringing design to the table. So I'm like, am I
I've heard that
again
too.
getting
Yeah.
into that?
Yeah. I think because UX is growing a lot, and I think even at companies that don't even have like a UX team established. So I feel like you might run into those kind of scenarios at like startups, companies. Like I've been, like I said, fortunate where I'm working at a place like Shopify where design is the forefront of things. So we already are at the table. So we're not fighting those battles anymore, and now we can just focus on like shipping quality product. But I think it depends on where your interests are. If you want to build those foundations, like definitely look for those opportunities where UX is not established as much. And if you want to be part of a team where that a lot of that work's already done, then you can seek out those opportunities too.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to Charlotte, and then I think Channing, and we'll see where we are on time.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah, you kind of spoke on this just a second ago, but essentially my question was kind of in regards to just starting out, and I'm starting to apply to different things now as I'm finishing up my program, which I'll be done in about 2 months. And I'm trying to figure out if I should start applying to more startups or if I should apply to larger companies. I've worked at a startup before in different roles, more in the customer service and helping with tech support. But I do kind of want to hone in on my new skills. So I'm wondering, which route you would recommend.
Great question. We can probably even like chat if you want to connect with me after. We can probably even chat about this in more depth too. But one of the things that, because I had the same thoughts when I was also starting to get into design, and one of the things my first lead had told me was, don't work for a startup. When especially at the initial stages of your career, don't work for a startup. Definitely do it maybe after a couple years. And thinking about it now, I think that's the best advice he gave me, just because I was working at companies where we already had a design team and it wasn't in that startup phase. I had a lot of mentorship and I was able to learn a lot more from experienced designers. And that has scaled in terms of like my skills and my understanding of design so much. It's had such a great growth trajectory that I don't know if I would have had that working at a startup, because often there might be a lot of change. UX might not be established there. You might be fighting a lot of the battles that you won't even know how to fight. And sometimes that takes a lot of experience and exposure in the field to be able to defend design. So that's my personal opinion. You could take that with a grain of salt, but that was my experience with thinking about those.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
All right, Channing.
I have a question more about design maturity within your company. What kind of design evangelism or just promoting design have you found, or if it's needed at all, that has helped with design maturity and growing design maturity in your company, or is it something that's already the company's already there?
Good question. Unfortunately, Channing, like I'm not an expert on that. Maybe I will be in a few years if I decide to work at a startup where I have to help build those foundations. But it's very different. I think I partially experienced that in one of my initial jobs where I was working, where like I think design was still being seen as a bottleneck. I had my lead who was pretty much telling me about all the frustrations that he had to deal with. Like I said, I was lucky because I was reporting into him, so I didn't have to deal with that. But it becomes very hard, especially with even the smallest things of having a budget, being able to learn. All of those things really matter, especially in this field where like it's growing and you need to be in the know. You need to update yourself. You need to constantly be learning. So sometimes like when you're at a place where that foundation isn't there and it's seen as a bottleneck, it can be really challenging. So I know he's had a lot of hot debates during his time there. So that's as much as I know. So I don't really have a solid answer for you.
Well, do you find that, and where you're at, because it sounds like there's a lot of good design maturity there, that you have, that the teams thrive on a bit of like autonomy and they're able to innovate and design and push forward new things?
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have that. And I love that. Our CEO, Toby, he really prides in UX and he has a lot of respect for it. And I think when it's already at that level, you know that how important UX is to the company and also to the products that we're putting out and our merchants that are using it. So yeah, we definitely have the opportunity to explore and do so much. There's so many other opportunities that I've been fortunate enough to get through working at Shopify.
Sounds great. I want to apply.
You should. We just had our internships close, I think, for the summer, but you should look into them for the fall. Shopify plug.
Awesome. So I think those are all the questions in the chat. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to ask?
Just quick question. Sorry, I keep chiming in. So since Pavi, I'm just venturing into UX design. I did actually take a online certification, and it's actually accredited from a university in Europe. Should I be looking into more into like internship design roles at this point, or what do you suggest? Because portfolio wise, I have the work that I did during that course, but I also talked to a mentor of mine and she said like there were like a couple of brand guidelines that I created and website design and stuff. She said I can add that into my UX portfolio, but I just wanted to have your take on it too.
This is a good question, and I think a couple of folks have asked me this before. I think again, this is like my personal response. I feel like it's the best to start off with an internship. That's usually what I encourage other folks to do. I kind of wish I started off with an internship because it can be very overwhelming jumping into a full-time role without having an understanding, especially for your first job. And internships, you're most often guaranteed that you'll have someone to mentor and coach you. And that holds so much value. I can't emphasize that enough, of being able to be under someone's wing, and you learn so much just through spending time with them, observing like their process, the way they work, because a lot of the things that we learn through school and a lot of these courses don't really reflect how the real process is. So that can always be challenging. So I definitely recommend internships.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll throw my +1 on internships. That's how I got into the industry 14 years ago. So it's definitely a great place to start, particularly if you are making that shift from another industry into it. It's invaluable to have that soft landing and get started in the field. I'll do one last call for questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, I have another question. How do you keep up with all the UX trends? There's so much happening. It's like every time I learn something, there's something new always happens, but how do you keep up with it?
Oh my gosh, you're preaching to the choir. That's a real challenge. I till today seriously struggle with that because there's just too much content. I think like in terms of like you have Medium articles, you have all these courses, all these videos that are teaching you like all these things. At the beginning, I too was very overwhelmed, I think, with knowing what to read, but I felt like over time, I've slowly started to filter things out, and that has really helped. I'm not sure if anyone else has like go-tos that they refer to. If I can think of like top of mind right now in terms of like design related, I don't look at too much content actually. I specifically look at it depending on the context that I'm in. For example, like if I know that I have to set up like a design workshop or something, and I might go in with like my own take of like how I would lead that, but I would also just search up on how other workshops are done. So I usually do it within context. In terms of news and keeping up to date, I sometimes go to designer news. I know a couple people might be looking into that. I think for the link, Michelle, it's like designernews.com or something. But that usually has like quick updates, and I think it pulls from like various different like articles, so you can always refer to that as well.
What was that name of the link again? I'm sorry.
I think it's designer news. Let me see if I can
Thank you.
grab it here and I'll throw it in the chat.
While she's looking for that, I'll throw in the interaction design is a good resource if you're looking for UX kind of practices and those kinds of things as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all again for attending tonight. We are looking for speakers for March. So if anybody's interested in speaking, even if it's a short 15 minutes, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. So I encourage you guys to reach out to me or to Sue, who is my co-organizer here. And we'd love to get you guys scheduled to speak with us about your experiences, because everybody works differently at the work that they do. So if you have experiences with boot camps, we'd love to hear about those, portfolios, the work that you do, research, design. We are open to hear it all. And I do welcome you guys to take a look at our YouTube channel for some of our previous talks if you're curious about that. You can just look up Gainesville UX Meetup, and you should have access to many of our previous sessions. Again, if you're interested if you live or work within 50 miles of downtown Gainesville, and you're interested in the UX certification program, please feel free to reach out to me at mbrownstein@352.com, and happy to give you more information. So in the meantime, everybody stay safe out there, everybody stay warm, and we'll see you next month. Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Pavi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.